Hello friends, my name is Matt and welcome to the Joy of Nerding. Today we're going to do a spaceship. This is a model from Dragon Crest miniatures and it was called the Dragon Crest. Now it is part of a separate vehicle pack that is called the Outpost Origins vehicle kit, which has parts and instructions to build this model as well as many others, inspired by your favorite movie and TV shows. Now, we're going to be starting to paint it today, and the first thing we need to do is discuss our strategy. I'm a process painter in that I'm not an artist. I paint from a series of recipes or instructions. So let's talk about how we intend to paint this. So here's our model, and we're thinking about, I want this to be very much in the style of the Razor Crest from The Mandalorian, which means that we're going to want a silver metallic, which we'll use this one, and on top of that silver metallic we're going to want to weather it. So I'm going to weather it with some of this Vallejo game wash so that we get it settling into the cracks. Now, the challenge with that is when you do something like apply the wash over the metallic, it's going to reactivate the metallic. These are acrylics, and what I found is that the little metallic particles will tend to flow with the wash into the cracks, and that's not what we want. We want a shiny metal surface with the panel lines picked out by the wash. The other thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be wiping it away. This is fundamentally it's a dipping formula where you dip the whole thing in it and then you shake it. Wonderful idea. I don't think that's going to work here. So we're going to brush it on and then wipe it off so that the raised areas stay shiny and it settles into the cracks nicely. In order to facilitate that, we're going to shoot a layer of gloss varnish on top of the metallic, so that the metallic is now fixed in place by the gloss varnish. The gloss varnish will protect our ship. We will then do the wash on top of the gloss varnish and we'll wipe it free using gloss, because matte varnish tends to not be as slick, and really what we want is it to settle off into the panels and give us some detail, and then we'll do additional weathering on top of that. Or maybe we'll do successive passes. We'll have to see how it goes. It's a fluid situation when it comes to weathering. You keep doing it until it's right. But as we all, I think, know, metallics look best on top of a black base coat. Since we are doing a black base coat, what I would do is black prime, because why bother with a white prime, which is what I would commonly use. So I would normally go to my go-to of 50-50 mix of black gesso and glass and tile medium, then thinned with a little bit of distilled water so that I can go through the airbrush nicely. But that's not what we're doing today. And the reason we're not doing that today is because I have some of this Badger Stinel Res in gray. This is not my favorite primer. I keep buying new primers to not have to mix this, because one of the things about the gesso and the glass and tile medium is it will chemically react, so you can't mix it up ahead of time. You have to mix it and shoot it and mix it and shoot it. Nice thing about it though is you can also brush it on. So if you don't have an airbrush, you can mix it and brush it, and that will work well for you. However, I bought this to try it. It was not to my taste. I found that it was not as rugged of an adhesion as the gesso and the glass and tile medium, so it could chip. For the purpose of a weathered spaceship, I'm okay if it chips. As you see, there's a gray underneath. It will be clear that it's not metallic, but it'll look okay. So we're going to use this up because fundamentally I am frugal and don't want to waste that money. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to take this apart, and while I'm taking it apart, I'll go over some of its features. This is designed as wargaming terrain, not a static model, and therefore it has almost like playset features, right? So you can take the back off here. It's got little clips that hold it on, and you can have a little ramp that goes down. There's another little ramp that comes down. It goes up and down here, gives a hatch. Again, this comes off, which is nice. So if you were to want to have your models in there for a diorama, you could. It's a mix of gaming terrain and action figure playset, so it scratches all of those itches that one would really like. It holds in place with these little clips. Other models I've used have magnets. I did try and print some of these solid and drill them out and put in magnets. That didn't work so well, mainly because of this piece. You'd go like this because, of course, you want to take your spaceship and close everything up and go and make spaceship noises. And when you turn it and the top falls off, it's very not dramatic. So I decided to stay with the clips, but in this case, I did fillers here. And we're going to paint these. They'll look like panel lines. Same thing with the bottom here, is that there were spaces for additional clips in there, and I've just filled those in with fillers that I printed them in a different color because that's what filament. I had some that I had just a little bit left on the spool and wanted to run out. Once you paint them, nobody's going to see them. So I have my lovely cardboard tray here, and you may ask, where does one get such a fine cardboard tray? And the answer is IKEA. They send you the cardboard tray complimentary when you buy these nice shelving units. Honestly, though, you can use whatever cardboard you want. It's literally just to carry it. We're not even going to be painting it on these. But I like to lay out my things so that it's all readily carried out to the paint shop. Oh, I should also mention, not going to be painting this in my normal paint booth. This is a big model. I'm going to be blowing a lot of paint, so I'm going to be painting it out in the garage because you have a lot more space, and I want to be able to get at these individual pieces nicely. Other features of this model are that it is obviously set up for a certain bounty hunter, hence it's got his cryo chamber to carbon freeze his bounties. That is not useful in the generic case. We're going to still paint this because I want to use this as a multi-purpose ship. It is that type of ship which can be used for security forces coming in our war game or whatnot, and only when we have the hero version of that ship will we swap these out. So we're going to paint both of these. These side panels come off, and we're going to leave these separate. I purposely am not gluing them in place. I'm not sure that this is actually, if you look at it, is never going to be seen, so it's not even necessary to paint that surface. We can just paint it like this. Same way as that we'll paint most of these faces of it, whatever overspray, but we're not going to worry about putting detail on the back because no one's ever going to see it. And on this side, they have the cargo netting. Now, I printed out 2 of these pieces of cargo netting so that we'll have the cargo netting on both sides. So the idea is that when it's used in its capacity as a generic transport ship, you can put cargo in that center bay, a small amount. When it's used to deliver security forces, they would be hanging on to that or putting their gear attached to bits of cargo netting. The seat moves forward and back, which is kind of nice. I'm just going to take it out, and that way it makes it easy to paint. I reserve the right. I have to see how this goes. We may end up putting these in here, and then that gives us something to hold while we spray it. But then, see, you've got to have a place to put it. I'm not certain that I have a good place to put it, although I suppose I could snap it into there. I have to think about that one, because if you put it down wet, obviously it's going to stick. And then we have this seat, which there's, as you can see, there's 2 seats here. So there's this seat, which is for 2 people, and then you have this seat, which is for 1 person and a baby. And there's even a little baby swaddling in there, because you don't know what baby would be in there. There's a few different versions of this. I just went with that one. But the kit has, I think there was an open one and a closed one, and one with the little floppy-eared Muppet, if you catch my meaning. And so that is that. We've taken out all of our larger pieces here. We've taken out all of our clips here. You can pop the doors off, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to paint them as is. We'll let any paint flow into them, and if we have to, we'll give them a little wiggle. I glued the guns on and so forth, so that it's a rigid main hull, but that's what we're going to paint. Now, as far as the windows go, there were 2 different layouts for this. One where it was actually 3D printed ones, that's a slot in here, and I printed those. And there were also an EPS file and a JPEG file that were the same thing. They were window templates, so that you could feed them into a cutter, cut them out of, say, an acetate or whatever. I have a theory as to how we're going to do that as sort of a poor man's approach, using things that I have, and we'll see how that goes. And we'll see if we care. I mean, one of the things that I learned doing research into how they do a lot of the models on movies is they don't put any glass in them because it's not necessary. You can see inside and see the detail of the model, whereas if you put a glass or a tinted glass, it would distort that and also pick up on the lighting. And so the last thing you want is a light reflected back on you, which is one of the things about the poster behind me, is if you see, the lights are reflected in the poster. And so if you were going to do that on your ship, you end up with lights reflected here, whereas you can see me through here without the light reflecting because there's a light source in front of us. So it's perfectly acceptable to not have glass in the canopies of your spaceships. Why not? There's no rules here. Do what looks good. Do what you like to do. So we're going to take this out, which means that we're going to need to back the car out and set up some tables. And here we catch sight of the famous, elusive Padfoot, legendary in her scarcity, and renowned with her ability to camouflage, hiding behind trees. Hello again, friends. We are now out in the garage. I have most things set up. We're going to mix up our primer, which I like this Badger paint mixer. And now there's a key modification that needs to be made to this Badger paint mixer, which is the splatter shield. As you can see, it's prevented a lot of paint from getting on me. Excuse me. Sorry, forgot to turn that off. So, the use of this is very simple. You take this and place it on top of it. Oh, there's a hole in the bottom in case that was not clear. You hold it like this, insert, and then turn on. I was watching a presentation given by, what's his name, Ken, the head of Badger. And he said the order of operations here is very important, especially when taking it out. You need to turn it off, then remove it. Otherwise, you get a speckled shirt. So I like to move this up and down a bit and put it down on the table. And the key here is apparently this is how they fill it. They have they keep it mixed while being filled, and they run it down a mixer. At least that was what Ken led us to believe. So you just mix that up until it's a nice uniform consistency, and again, turn it off, then remove it. Now, the other trick that I have up my sleeve is this, which is a bottle full of water. And you take the bottle full of water and you put the dirty paint mixer in it, and you run it for a little bit, turn it off, and oh gee, it comes out mostly clean. Now that said, it's a function of the cleanliness of your water, and this isn't, because water should not be that viscous. So I'm going to have to address that. But give this a wipe, keeps the paint from accumulating into many, many, many layers of crust. There we go. The other thing that occurred to me is by using the gray as opposed to black for the prime, when we go to do the inside, it will not be dark black, it will be gray. So that's going to set the tone for the paint applied to it, because if you put a color on a white background, you'll get a pure color, and then the lighter primers that you use will end up darkening it up slightly, which for our application works well. But I was mostly thinking about the outside. I start by painting things upside down because one of the things I noticed is, and I'm going to try wax paper, I think, in the future, but I checked and we don't have any. But I think wax paper would be a good thing to try, is if I paint it too heavily and it runs down, you're going to get a pool and it's going to tear the cardboard. Now, if I then clean it up and then prime over it, it's fine, which means that you want to do it upside down because we don't really care if the feet get a little bit of cardboard on them, but we will notice it if it's here. Same thing is that if I do it this way first, fine, and then if I go like this, if this gets a little bit of cardboard stuck to it, we'll just peel that off and you hardly ever see it, whereas if it was on this raised area, I would be a little upset, I think. All right, so let's get to priming. This is a Grex Pistol airbrush. I got this one because when doing large pieces like this, it hurts my hand to have to push this and all that. Plus, you can get these with enormous cups. And so I'm going to fill this with a large amount of primer, and we'll get that sorted. The other nice thing about the cup is that you can move it like this if you're spraying down from the top, which I may very well do at times. For now, we're going to start with it at about a 45-degree angle. And the important thing here is a lid, which I will put on it, and I'll also only fill it up halfway. Even though I mixed it, I still habitually shake things because I'm old-fashioned. Oh, and actually, I guess there's a mixing bead in this. That's interesting. I was going to say there is no mixing bead, but there is a mixing bead, and I can hear it. I must have thrown one in there at one point. Or maybe they come with one? I don't know. Oh, I should mention, this is the biggest needle that you can get in here. I want to say this is a 0.8. When you're painting big things like this, you need a big needle like this to throw a lot of paint. But you have to be careful to not throw too much paint because you'll get puddles. And that's bad. That's a bad thing. I am now going to turn on my fan because I like to have the air pulled out. You can see it down in the corner, and of course go with our dust mask because one needs a dust mask when painting. Now, to be clear, these are acrylics, which means they don't have hazardous fumes, hence why this is not a full respirator. But you do have to worry about particulate inhalation, and especially if you're talking about primers, they're especially sticky. And you'll know when you've been painting without using your dust mask, because when you go to blow your nose, it will come out in whatever colored primer you've been using. When inside, I actually have a very strong blower that's more than the fan, and that actually pulls the particulates right away from you. But out here, ironically, even though I'm outside, I do end up having to use one of these. So let's get started. I just realized that I missed some supports. So we're gonna have to come in here. Models are still sticky, but look at this. I missed some support material. Can't have that. Look at that. Missed some support material. Bad modeler. Now, the good news is that there's this spot here. We don't need to sand it. It's pretty clean. It'll be all right. And we'll just hit that with the primer and continue on our way. Alright, now I started to paint these, but what I found was that the air from the airbrush, the pressure, was enough to push it. And of course we can't have that. So the right thing to do here is our good old friend blue tape. You tape like this, you make a little circle, and again, we don't care about painting that side, don't care at all. And if anything, it gives it just a little bit of thickness, so it's not quite on the cardboard, so it's less likely to stick to the cardboard in an undesirable fashion. Now, the one thing we need to make sure to do is get the bottoms of all of these, bottom sides, all that. These stick out a little bit, like they flare out. So that's actually pretty easy there. But these seats, those are going to be a little tricky. And so we're going to make sure to put them on the edge so we can get down low, take a low angle shot with the airbrush. And I'm purposely putting it like that because that will be easy to get from the end. And that one there. Now this is tricky. Again, I said I don't quite know how to do this one. If I put it like this, it's just going to get blown around, and you can't tape it like that. I can put it on the side. That's actually probably reasonable. I can do this and hold it, but then I need a place to put it once it's done. What do I have that would serve well as a clip? What about this? Can I paint it? Can I hold it and then paint it and put it on the lip? No, can't put it on the lip. That's not going to work. It falls off. What else do I have in the garage? Aha. Because I'm in the garage, we have to improvise. This is an oil filter wrench. It fits that just lovely, wouldn't you say? Look, see? Even can take a little bit of, actually, I'm going to do it like that. I'm going to take this, and I'm going to throw a bit of masking tape on this, and I'm going to fold it over, like so. And then I'm going to put this right on here. Makes it just a little bit thicker. And I'm going to hold this like this, and I'm going to spray it just like that. And then I won't get any on my fingers, and I'll get good coverage, and I'll do the whole thing in one shot. And then I can just gently put it there. Perfect. All right, let's get back to it. I forgot to take that one down. Okay, so now we are at a point where the first thing that we painted has been sitting for a few minutes. And the bottle says, check all areas, respray any light areas or any areas where the item's actual color is still detectable. Let dry 5 to 8 minutes. Your item is now primed and ready for painting. Now, the thing is, I'm a little bit of a suspicious sort, or cautious is probably the right way to put it. I intend to let it dry overnight, then flip it. So I'm going to do a second coat, because I like 2 coats of primer, 2 light coats. So I'm going to respray all these again. The color change is going to be less detectable this time around, but then we'll get a nice even coat. I might let it dry for a couple of hours and then do it, but realistically, with my schedule today, I'm going to have time to do one more, and then I have to go pick up my children from school, and that's kind of the end of the time I have for today. But we're going to go progress through this again and do a second coat just like the first. Oh, I forgot to paint this guy. We're going to do this guy. All right, so this is not my primer. This is my mug. It would be bad to dump out my primer into my mug. This is what I was reaching for. So I have a little bit of primer left. I'm going to throw that in the old primer bottle. Waste not, want not, friends. And then perhaps the most important thing for your joy of airbrushing is to make sure to clean out your airbrush when you are finished, which also means you need to make sure to leave ample time for doing so before you do things like go pick up your children. My phone says it is 2:15, so I have plenty of time. I have 3 things for this. One is my airbrush cleaner. This is my homebrew airbrush flush, which is 25% alcohol, 75% distilled water, and a squirt of dish soap as a minor surfactant. So you can shake it up and you can see a little bit of bubbles. Sorry, not dish soap, rinse aid. Rinse aid. Key difference there. And then we have perhaps the most important thing is my flush bottle. It has, as you can see, it was a peanut container that I have taken a scrap of old something. Gonna go with underpants, looks like underpants, and an elastic band. You have to replace the elastic band once every couple of years because it rots away. And the idea is, and then you poke a hole in it. So you can put your airbrush into here and go, and there you go. Oh, and you also probably want a little bit of this paper towel. So the first thing is I clean out the large reservoir. That is the downside to a large reservoir, is you end up having a large cup to clean out. So let's start with that. Get that out. And you can tell that it's a primer rather than a paint because it's especially sticky. Another thing that I found the hard way When you store these, store them like that. Because if you store them like this or like that, it's harder with these because they're not flat cup, but I have some flat cups. If you store them like this, the paint sets right in the joint here, which means that you then have to sit there with a scrubby brush or something and get it out. If you go like this, it runs out on you, which is exactly what you want. You want it to be in the cup. You don't want it settled in the joint. This is one of the really trick things about this airbrush is there's a magnet in here. So you don't thread this on, it just sits in there and the magnetism holds it. Because miracles. Clean that all off so it's nice and shiny. There we go. You don't want to let any of this dry. As much as, one might want to be lazy and do it that way, you don't want to let it dry. And the same thing is that you can get it all clean in a small parts cleaner, like an ultrasonic cleaner, but I don't recommend it. I've done it before for certain airbrushes that were really bad, but you have to take them completely apart, and generally speaking, you're going to have to replace all the seals, because for some reason, those small, delicate parts do not want to be vibrated together like that. And then when you take them out, I found that some of the seals were cork or some other material that did not take kindly to that either, and degraded as well. Oh, you can also pull the needle. I don't always pull the needle, but we'll do it today. Why not? All right, so this is nice and clean. So pulling the needle, so you want to undo this one, and then you undo this chuck, and you pull the needle out. And of course, anytime I take the needle out, give it a nice wipe. You want to be careful to do this straight. And I have some of this Reg Dab Badger needle juice. So whenever I take the needle out, I do this. Just put a little bit on here, and then when you put it in, you give it a spin. So as you're inserting it, you spin it. And so what that'll do is it coats the inside with the needle juice lubricant. And you can also put, dabs of it in here if you need to, if your trigger's a little sticky or whatever. But this doesn't need any, and you don't want too much lube, because that would be bad. You don't want it too slippery. There's a Goldilocks zone when it comes to lube. You want it just right. You don't want too much lube. You don't want too little lube, because otherwise things either get too slippery or too sticky. And that's true of lots of things. You don't want to overfill the oil in your car, right? Too much oil in your car, the crankcase doesn't have enough room to breathe. Too little oil, you get mechanical wear. So, universally life applicable rules. Now, we've had this sit. I always do the cup first. We've had this sit, and there's a little bit of that settle. What I told you, it was settling out. It was upside down, so there you go. So what I do is wipe that out, and then I put this back on. All right, and then we've got this. Now, first thing I do is turn this on full blast, squirt a little bit of this in here, and then Hello friends, and welcome to the portion of the show where I recommend something to watch or listen to while painting. For this episode, my recommendation is the audiobook Doom Guy, Life in First Person by John Romero. The audiobook is read by the author, which I think is a nice touch because it is his autobiography, and he reads it to you, which gives a very personal tale. If you enjoy nostalgia, retro things, talk about the history of id Software, video game development in general, if you have an interest in what it was like to grow up in the 70s and 80s as a bit of an outcast, but also a very intelligent person, John gives a very good account of that. I found it informative and entertaining. It touches on, as I said, nostalgia and video games and gives a good retro feel. I got it on Audible, but I assume it is available other places. As always, thank you for watching, and as always, stay nerdy.